It's no news that Japan has one of the most exotic, delicious, and nutritious meals around most world regions and races. From their signature sushi dish to onigiri, tofu, sashimi, and ramen, the Japanese people have indeed mastered the art of creating and serving some of the most unique and tastiest dishes. Another incredible dish rooted in Japan is miso soup. And while this might not be well known, it is a famous Japanese dish made from the finest natural dried kelp and dried smoked bonito flakes. Now, wait till you find out its secret ingredients and recipes, which will give you another reason to fall in love with its meals and make you want to visit the country. Let's dive right in, shall we? Miso soup is just as well known as any other dish in Japan. You could walk into any Japanese restaurant right now, and I bet you'll find miso soup on the menu. In fact, the dashi granules it's made from come in instant packages and are sold in conveniently sized jars or packets in grocery stores nationwide. That's to tell you it's more than just a side dish. In a broader sense, miso soup is a traditional Japanese soup often served as an appetizer at restaurants. In most Japanese homes, it's cooked for breakfast with a bowl of white rice and a simple protein choice like broiled fish, mushroom, or egg. Miso soup can also be a dish made easily in the evenings, as most of its cooking only involves putting on a pot of rice and making a quick stir-fry or broiling the fish. It can be eaten just with rice for a light but filling meal. By now, you must have known that most Japanese meals, if not all, come with an interesting backstory of how it was discovered and became a signature dish in Japanese restaurants and homes. So the origin of this popular meal can be traced back to ancient times. It became a daily meal for the samurais during the Kamakura period and during the age of Japanese civil wars. The recipe for its instant paste was developed for the military commanders to eat, making miso soup an easily preparable and accessible meal. Miso soup is made from miso paste and a popular traditional Japanese fish stock known as dashi, which is simply made from dried sardines, dried kelp, and shavings of dried bonito or dried shiitake mushrooms. But aside from dashi, the miso paste gives the soup its rich, tasty flavor. When it comes to the ingredients used to prepare miso soup, personal preference is put highly into consideration for lighter or stronger textures and flavors. However, some common ingredients are crisp or sliced onions, tofu, spinach, mushrooms, egg, fish, and shellfish. Miso soup can be prepared in 3 simple steps. First, bring the water and dashi granules to a short boil. Next, reduce the heat and whisk in your miso paste. And finally, stir in the tofu, sliced onions, spinach, and any protein choice. Now the dish is prepared and can be served in small portions to complement the bowl of rice, sashimi, and steak. As mentioned earlier, miso paste is the main ingredient in miso soup, as it contains the most nutrients and flavors. So let's learn how it's made. First, the paste is obtained by fermenting grain with koji mold. And to add a quick tip, the longer the paste has been aged, the more nutritious the miso soup will be. Miso paste is also divided into 2 main categories, red and white. It's also important to know that these categories are broad, meaning the different colors have distinct flavors and strengths depending on the fermentation process. Red miso has higher quantities of soybeans than other grains. It has a strong flavor and produces a dark reddish color when prepared. On the other hand, white miso has lesser soybeans, so it gives off a more beige than red color, and a sweeter and milder flavor than red miso. Because of this, it's best used for heavier soups, stews, and marinades for meat. However, there is no rulebook for which miso to use, and you can even have a mix of red and white miso if you choose. Now, you know all about the ingredients and process of making miso soup, but do you know how to make its base? No? Let's find out. Dashi is a fish and seaweed stock in the Japanese food arsenal and a vital ingredient for miso soup. However, its liquid base doesn't always have to be that. It can even be water as long as it's light and unsalted. Still, let's see how the dashi base is made. Dashi is made by soaking kombu and thick strips of dried kelp in hot water. The kombu is then taken out, and the smoked bonito flakes are added to the water to infuse for a few minutes and then strained out. The result is a pale yellow stock with a smoky and slightly briny taste, which is the backbone of most Japanese cooking. Also, dashi isn't only used for light soups like miso soup, but also in dipping sauces, savory egg custards, and for poaching or braising. And once prepared, it can be preserved in the refrigerator for up to a week, so you don't have to worry about finishing it all at once. Like any other Japanese soup, miso soup does not require any expertise and can be prepared by even a newbie in the kitchen. But to achieve the most delicious and flavorful miso soup, you must take note of some tips and tricks. Number 1. Usually, many cooks will rinse the kelp or wipe it gently with a kitchen towel to reduce the white powdery residue. But here's one thing they don't know. The white residue found on the kelp is called mannitol, and it adds lots of umami and flavors to the soup. Number 2. This one is a simple tip for achieving flavorful miso soup. When soaking your kombu, take the kelp out of the water before it begins to boil, or else it can leave a bitter flavor in the soup and make the broth slimy. Number 3. Now the kelp and bonito flakes have been removed from the water, it's safe to keep the broth boiling. But you mustn't boil the soup after the miso is added, or you'll lose most nutrients like probiotics, folate, niacin, and vitamin K, if not all. Number 4. To achieve the perfect miso soup without having large lumps, when dissolving the miso, put a large fine mesh sieve into the dashi and whisk the miso in the broth. However, if some chunks and residue bits of soybeans are left in the sieve, you can scrape them into the soup. And number 5. You can dissolve the miso with a fork in a wide bowl using a little dashi, then pour the mixture back into the pot. It's common to prepare miso soup and not finish everything at once, so hence the question, how do I preserve or store my miso soup? Although this tasty Japanese meal is best eaten immediately after cooking, or it could lose its nutritional value, you could store the leftovers in the refrigerator. However, it'll still taste fine and delicious, but just not as good as the first time it was prepared. So you must note that when reheating the miso soup, ensure the pot is removed from the heat just as it simmers, because many of its nutrients can be lost if it's boiled for too long. Also, as an alternative to enjoying all of the flavors of miso soup without losing any nutrients, the dashi should be prepared ahead of time and preserved in the refrigerator for up to a week. Then, when ready to serve, bring the dashi to a short boil and whisk the miso into the soup. This way, you'll enjoy both the flavors and nutrients from the meal. The many health benefits and nutritional values of miso soup have been preached on since the beginning of this video. However, let's get into more specific details here. Miso soup's first obvious health benefit is it's low in calories, high in proteins, and gluten-free. It's also believed that miso soup helps to increase basal metabolism and relieve constipation. More studies have revealed that it can help in preventing cancer and hypertension. It's also been suggested by Japan's National Cancer Center that having 3 bowls of miso soup a day can reduce the risk of breast cancer in women. Another amazing fact about miso soup is that it has several variations and ways to enjoy it based on personal preferences. So it can be a great meal addition to your diet if you're trying to control your weight or appetite. You can choose to prepare a vegan version by substituting the dried kelp and mushrooms and their soaking liquids for bonito flakes. For a healthier option, you can also add vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and kombucha squash into the dashi before whisking it into the miso. By now, it's an unarguable fact that Japan has some of the most flavorful and healthy meals around the world, miso soup being at least in the top 5 spots. Its benefits range from stopping a cough or cold to reducing cancer risks in women. So if you've ever looked for a reason to want to visit Japan, the country's great meal choices are a perfect reason.